Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Always nice to have this energy at this point in the conference, from the kind of ice breaking stuff now to, everyone knows everybody. It's all good. Happy with that. So thanks for joining us for the closing plenary of 2025 conference. I'm Ted Wilson, president of the OAA, and I'm a Sudbury-based architect and lecturer at the MacEwan School of Architecture in Sudbury, Ontario. I've had a wonderful time over the last few days here, and I hope you have as well, and I think from all the chatter, I'm sure that's the case. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land on which we gather. Ottawa and the surrounding watershed is the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, Algonquin people who've been stewards of the land and are deeply connected to its rich cultural and natural landscape. We honor the land our buildings and spaces are part of, and the connections to the land Indigenous peoples have valued since time immemorial. We are grateful for Indigenous knowledge that guides us and commits to building in harmony with the land and creating sustainable spaces for generations to come. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge our responsibility to address past and present injustices and provide space for traditional knowledge and worldviews to shape the architectural landscape of Turtle Island. Over the past 3 days, we've explored this year's theme of reshaping communities. The energy, ideas, and collaborative spirit shared during our conference has been really inspiring, and I know many of you are walking away with new perspectives and renewed passion. I want to thank OAA staff, the Ottawa Regional Society of Architects, our conference planners, MCC, and our many volunteers for their work both here and at the event, as well as in the months leading up to it. A lot of preparation. Thank you as well for our valued sponsors, speakers from all over Ontario and beyond, to all of you as delegates for participating. Now, I'd also like to take a moment to recognize individuals who have made a significant contribution to the OAA and the profession. And to help me with this, our executive director, Kristi Doyle, is going to assist.
Thank you, Ted, and it's good to see everybody again. I hope you've been enjoying your week. On behalf of the OAA and our governing council, I have the great pleasure of extending and expressing our sincere appreciation to two of our past members of council who concluded their terms on council at the end of last year. Greg Redden began his tenure on council in 2022, and he transitioned from a very active role that he had with the executive of the Niagara Society of Architects. His thoughtfulness, wit, and sincere grassroots focus enriched many of our discussions around the council table. As a member of council, Greg dedicated time to the work of the OAA Complaints Committee as well as the Experience Requirements Committee, both of these committees very essential to the fulfillment of the OAA's regulatory roles and responsibilities. His leadership in sustainable building practices, connection to local issues, and his ability to bring community perspective to the table were greatly valued. Now, unfortunately, Greg was not able to be with us today to join us to receive his certificate of appreciation, but we'll make sure that that gets sent to him next week. Our next recipient is Christina Carney, and Christina is here with us today, so maybe I'll ask you to come up and join us on staff so that you can, or on stage, so that you can get your certificate. Christina was also elected to the council in 2022, bringing an infectious and positivity and unique perspective to her role as a councillor. Over the course of her 3-year term, Christina served as vice president and also was the chair of a number of OAA committees, including the Policy Advisory Coordination Team, the Sustainable Built Environment Committee, as well as the Communications and Public Education Committee. Christina's strategic mindset and innovative ideas leaves a lasting mark on the council's work, and we are very grateful for her commitment to the profession. Thank you, Christine. You want to stand in the middle?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we on the mark? Thank you. Okay. Back to you, Craig. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Kristi. Next, we're proud to recognize a new honorary member as voted on by the membership during the OAA's annual general meeting last month. Honorary membership is one of the highest distinctions the OAA can bestow on someone outside the profession, recognizing those who have provided extraordinary service to architecture or the association's goal. And this year, Dr. Ted Kessick has been appointed. Ted's been a transformative force in the sustainability community across North America. His groundbreaking work in energy modeling, building enclosures, design quality assurance, and resiliency has produced invaluable resources and tools that empower our profession to implement innovative, sustainable strategies. Equally passionate about education, Ted has inspired generations of architects through the teaching and professional programs he's been involved with the Toronto Society of Architects Technical Lecture Series. His dedication to advancing sustainable design and equipping the profession with actionable solutions has left an enduring legacy on the profession. Ted isn't able to be with us today, but he has asked me to convey a few words on his behalf. I truly regret I'm unable to be here in person, but I will always be with you in spirit. It's a privilege and a humbling experience to have been elected as an honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects. Educating architects, consulting to architects, and conducting building science research in support of more sustainable architecture has defined my career since 1986. As I embark on my 40th year of working in the architectural field, I wish to gratefully acknowledge the collegial support of those who nominated me for this honor. Thanks to the Ontario Association of Architects, the Toronto Society of Architects, former students, colleagues in the professional practice for bestowing the special status that I shall always cherish and hope to uphold. And please accept my apology for being so unapologetic about advocating for more building science education. Always, in architecture schools and continuing education programs, but I was just wanting to help everyone avoid litigation. That's Ted. And although he'd have elbows up, man, a hockey guy through and through, and keep a lid on your liability insurance premiums. That's for Bruce. Let's continue to design and build a better world. So thank you, Ted. I think applause for Ted. And now I'm excited to change gears to announce the theme for the 2026 OAA conference. Next year, we'll gather in Waterloo. Ontario is home to some of the, well, to pretty much all of the world's leading tech companies. Over 200, just to know, over 200 high-tech startups in Waterloo. This dynamic area is at the forefront of research on AI, automation, and energy modeling. Since it is home to Waterloo University's School of Architecture, it's also key to the evolving roles of the next generation of our profession. The 2026 conference theme will be Collaboration, Powering Innovation. The three-day event will look to explore how collaboration can help address climate crisis, housing shortages, and economic pressures on supply chains. It will explore the push of architectural practice toward resilience and adaptability through co-creation with teams, clients, citizens, and municipalities. I encourage everyone to mark the calendar for May 13th to 15th for what promises to be an exciting and forward-thinking conference. I think we have one. Okay. Super exciting place to be. I gotta say, I'm a biased Waterloo grad. Just saying. Okay, now for today's closing plenary session, Reimagining Heritage, a net zero Indigenous cultural space. This session will explore the adaptive reuse of a 19th century limestone building into the Kingston Native Center and Language Nest, or KNCLN, an 80% net zero energy facility for teaching and celebrating Indigenous craftsmanship and traditions. Our four esteemed presenters will discuss the collaborative Indigenous design process established from the project's inception, highlighting the integration of cultural heritage, sustainable design strategies, and coordination across disciplines. Thank you all once again for your participation and your engagement throughout the conference, and please join me in welcoming to the stage, first from the local practice CSV architects, Camille Lewis and Daryl Hood. Camille specializes in heritage preservation and is a licensed member of the OAA and the Board of Architecture of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. Daryl, Director of Sustainability at CSV, is a certified passive designer and lead AP with broad experience in leading multidisciplinary teams. So welcome to you both. Joining our first two guests are Brandon Maracle, Executive Director of the Kingston Native Center and Language Nest, KNCLN, who holds his Juris Doctorate and degree in linguistics. He is Ganyakahaga from Tyendinaga Mohawk territory and gained valuable experience in the profit world, working in supportive housing and shelter environments through his legal work. And finally, Ruth Nordegraf, Director of Community Development and Wellbeing with the City of Kingston, whose portfolio includes such areas as food security, aging, community safety, neighborhood activation, equity, diversity, and Indigenous initiatives. So welcome to you as well.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, OAA President. Thank you for the introduction. Members and guests. So thank you for joining CSV, the City of Kingston, and the Kingston Native Center and Language Nest for our closing plenary session. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that the project site is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples in Kingston, Ontario. So the learning objectives for our presentation are to understand the project team's collaborative Indigenous design process, to identify elements aligned with both Indigenous representation and heritage fabric, to define the project strategy for net zero energy design for a heritage building, and to understand the process of discipline coordination for net zero design. So I'll start with a little overview of our project. So the site is located at 610 Montreal Street, and it's situated along a major thoroughfare in the Rideau Heights neighborhood, just north of downtown Kingston. So on the slide, you can see that the Great Cataraqui River is just 500 meters to the southeast. So the corner lot is bounded by Montreal and Railway Streets, and includes a two-story heritage limestone building designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and also listed on the Canadian Register. The building was originally constructed in 1873 as the Depot School. KNCLN has been leasing the site from the City of Kingston since 2021. So the site is bounded to the west by an easement in favor of the Canadian Pacific Railway. So the easement and its proximity to the former Kingston and Pembroke Railway brick factory and maintenance yard will become important later on in the presentation. So this project fuses together several high priority topics in today's conversation in design and global social justice arenas. So some of these include rehabilitating the heritage building to meet high performance sustainability targets, designing a purpose-built space for Indigenous peoples through a collaborative design process, and finally, designing a modern addition to provide accessibility in a heritage building. So this project is physically modest in size. It's quite a small building. However, it soon became apparent that there are many complex layers embedded in the project scope of work. So the main elements of the design challenge that we had to face were to provide the cultural teaching space for KNCLN with modern amenities and to fully renovate and rehabilitate the interior and exterior of an uninsulated heritage stone building, to construct a replacement addition to house increased indoor programming, to remediate and reimagine the site to allow for traditional ways of being and interacting with the land, to improve interior and exterior accessibility to the facility, and finally, to achieve the net zero energy targets to meet the green and inclusive community building funding requirements. So this project, we began in April 2023, and to date, the project team, we've completed an intensive collaborative design phase, and we have obtained site plan control and heritage approval from the City of Kingston. Construction documents are complete, and we just started construction last month. So the contractor is presently beginning mobilization for the remediation phase. So now I'm going to pass it over to Ruth, who's going to be talking a little bit about the partnership with the City of Kingston.
Thank you, Camille. I'm just going to make sure my sound is on. Yes, awesome. I'm going to sit down for obvious reasons. First of all, I'm just really excited and privileged to be here today to speak to a room full of architects. As a non-architect, I'm actually an urban planner from the Netherlands, so I'm not sure how I ended up here. But I obviously am working for the City of Kingston as one of the directors, and this project is such a wonderful, I think, opportunity to really bring together a very kind of intentional journey that the city is going through in reconciliation, and a physical project that is also really responding to the needs of a community and is also really creating an opportunity for social fabric and social infrastructure. Obviously, as this is an Ontario conference, I assume most people are quite familiar with Kingston. Little promo, if you haven't been, please go. It's about 2 hours from here. It's beautiful, and it's, I think, the right mix between urban, rural, beautiful water, heritage buildings, and I'm slightly biased, great people. I wanted to touch on kind of the census information that we have. About 133,000 people live in Kingston. It's a very fast-growing urban center, which is really creating lots of opportunities. And including in that information, we also see our Indigenous peoples and the number of people grow fast, actually faster than other groups. So it's a really thriving community, and we're really excited for the opportunities to work together. I wanted to kind of move to the next slide, Camille, and kind of before we jump into, I know Camille already positioned the project and the physical kind of the space, but that project, it did not just start, it didn't just happen. I would say it was years of intentional learning and unlearning and partnership building as a municipal government. And I wanted to point out to you kind of two key kind of foundational pieces that led to, I think, the ability to respond to this project and the opportunity to apply for a grant and find money and capital. One of them is a project that the municipal government initiated back in 2015 called Engage for Change, which I could speak about for another 3 hours, which I won't. But I want to point this out because, again, I know we're talking about reshaping communities and reimagining communities, and I think the relationship with between non-Indigenous and Indigenous peoples, and really kind of building that relationship, not to get to a project like this, but to really kind of start to understand each other, again, as I mentioned, kind of really transform that relationship. And this Engage for Change project, which consisted of different phases in a 10-year timeline, really led to some really kind of shared ideas and recommendations on how, as a city and as a community, we can transform our spaces, both our physical spaces, which obviously we'll talk about today, but also how we engage together, how we create protocols, how we learn, and how do we continue to really walk together on this journey. And I wanted to also touch on the next slide that Engage for Change project, again, was a 10-year kind of process, also was foundational for our political municipal council kind of strategic priorities. So every 4 years, again, obviously in a municipal government, there's a new council that sets priorities and puts in kind of specific ideas around what they would like to see in their 4-year term. And we were able to kind of, again, with that foundational work of Engage for Change, position projects and initiatives, both physical and social, in those council strategic priorities, which also meant there was like funding, commitments, interest, and excitement across kind of the council chambers, which I think is a really important part of how we reshape and rebuild communities as well. And I wanted to point out these two examples. There's a few more of other projects that we've been able to develop with the Indigenous community that, again, really speaks to that foundational or that intent and that journey together. Again, we'll not go into all the details of those two, but wanted to really position those. So then, about KNCLN, my friend Brandon, I know he will speak about KNCLN a little bit more soon, but the partnership, the formal partnership between the city and KNCLN really came, kind of created some more tangible, became more tangible, I should say, in 2021, when not only we were able to create an agreement with KNCLN, at that point still KILN, around some program dollars and some service level kind of agreements between the city and KILN, but we also, again, able to provide a space that obviously now is known as 610 Montreal, and we were able to again work together to really provide that cultural space, which was one of the recommendations that came out of the Engage for Change project. Again, Brandon, I cannot do justice to what KNCLN is doing, so Brandon will touch on that. The last thing I wanted to say around partnership is obviously being able to apply to the Green and Inclusive Community Building funding as a city was, again, really the result of an ongoing partnership, not trying to check a box, but really kind of be ready to actually collaborative with such an important partner and a city staff that's ready and willing and able and understands the need of a project like this. And to be able to really put in a strong application to this funds, which obviously was successful, and that really allowed us to leverage kind of the budget, part of the budget for this redevelopment. Between the city and the federal government, I would say it's about a 60-40% split of carrying the cost for this renovation. And I wanted to speak to that because I know we can talk a lot about relationship and liking each other and understanding each other, but ultimately it also comes down to money. So being able to have all those pieces in place, apply to the fund was really instrumental. So I will pass it over to Brandon, and I know he will speak a little bit more about KNCLN.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, everybody. Sego Sewagwego, Brandon Jungetz. So I have the privilege of being the executive director over at KNCLN, and it's been a thrill of a ride to dream of a space that is purpose-built or purpose-renovated for the community. It's not something that we often get to enjoy. Oftentimes things are set aside or reserved maybe for Indigenous folks, but this one has been a really exciting project because we felt very heard in this. So KNCLN became a friendship center in the fall of 2023. Are people familiar with friendship centers? Is that something? You guys have one in Ottawa. If you wanted to give money to somebody, I would suggest KNCLN first, maybe then the Ottawa Friendship Center afterwards. Yeah, there's 31 of us across Ontario, and the real charge of the OFIFC and friendship centers is to support the Ontario Indigenous population. 85% of Indigenous folks live in some sort of urban setting, but don't have these connections to reserves or rural supports that were available through the federal government. So friendship centers came in at that point. Next slide, please. So the KNCLN has really enjoyed and fully used the space that was available at 610, and so the opportunity to expand and to collaborate has been much needed. Our programs continue to grow. We've added, just in this past 2 months, a legal clinic, correction services, some employment programs as well. So we keep on growing and growing and growing and need the space, and space that is purpose-built for us as well, opposed to being fit into a building that is maybe a little bit tight. And most importantly, every friendship center will have food available. So if you're ever around one, please stop by for lunch, especially KNCLN. It's really important in any space, but particularly in Indigenous spaces, is learning across 3 generations and then thinking ahead 7. And so KNCLN, one of the challenges that was presented with 610 was it wasn't necessarily accessible, which prevented multi-generational collaboration in older program spaces. Folks who had mobility aids weren't able to use the whole space. There was some issues, some challenges with the land that I'm really excited that will be remediated, and we'll be actually able to use and interact with the land in traditional ways. As Ruth said, Kingston is growing, and Indigenous people are part of that space, and so our numbers keep on growing. Over the fall, we saw an increase from 15 people a day to 90 people throughout the fall, which is just mind-boggling to think that we fit that many people in the space that we had. So I'm quite eager for the renovation. Can't wait. I know that you guys are excited about doing the work. I'm excited about receiving it. Next slide, please. And so we have wonderful programs. We have a fantastic team, but programs and teams aren't what is important. It's the next generations. And so in Mohawk Thinking, we talk about 7 generations, that everything you do considers both 7 generations backwards and 7 generations forwards. Collaborating with this team has been incredibly exciting because there are people who are willing to dream. And reconciliation is this big fancy word with a capital R that no one really knows how to do. But it's been really cool to see the slow growth that we've been able to progress towards reconciliation and the collaboration. And I think really audacious dreaming that I don't think would have been capable in a generation or 2 past. So I stand on the shoulders of giants for people who've advocated, who got us to this point, and incredibly eager to continue working with this team.
Head back to the podium. So I am going to spend a bit of time speaking about our collaborative design process that we went through and implemented in the early functional programming and conceptual design stages. When we started to review the RFP that the City of Kingston put out, we quickly came across phrases like, the project will transform the historic building into a net zero energy and fully accessible community building. And it is important that the tenant is consulted at all stages of the design and development process to ensure that the building will be appropriate, sustainable, and accessible space, delivering crucial learning opportunities, and to be a focus for cultural and land connection and strengthening of community. You don't find that in a lot of RFPs. So it was very clear to us that the City of Kingston was really putting setting an expectation, really, that from the beginning of the design through the construction process, and this was only a point in time along a longer continuum of developing this relationship, and that the engagement of the entire team was paramount, and that also this process was really, the process of creating the facility was really more about encouraging growth and trust. So we were hooked. We definitely wanted to be a part of the project. I think we'll go to the next slide. For us, we looked at our team and we wanted to include passive house design and net zero experience, heritage experience, obviously. We also included interiors and material selection, and then also people from our team that have worked with the City of Kingston before. So then we complemented that with a large team of engineers, that we felt really would support the project and the complex architectural and engineering solution that it was going to need. We definitely brought on sub-consultants that had structural engineering and heritage masonry requirements and experience in that. Mechanical, electrical engineers that had a lot of experience with high-performance systems, as well as energy modeling, commissioning, photovoltaic design, landscape architects. We had archaeologists, civil engineering, planning, and a handful more. Because although, again, as Camille said, the project is small, there is a lot of complexity in the details. So after we were selected for the project, we finally were able to fill in those last empty chairs in the table. And at the first meeting with the City of Kingston's team, it was really clear that, again, they were going to be a very keen partner throughout the project, in support of KNCLN's needs. And this wasn't just budget and schedule discussions that we're going to be having. Again, we worked together with them. We'd worked with them before, so we kind of expected this, but this project definitely had a special feel to it. And that collaborative approach came through also even from the City of Kingston's Planning and Heritage Services Department. There was a lot of different processes that we had to submit, with all the complexities of the project, but they were really fully on board as well in a collaborative way, understanding there's heritage characteristics and priorities there, needs of the learning nest itself, as well as the sustainability goals of the City of Kingston. But where the project, really took its shape was working with Brandon's team at the KNCLN. That's, really once we got into those meetings, we could see how the building was shaping up. And this process was going to be needed. So we kind of took the lead in the collaborative design process to develop the roadmap for tackling the different aspects of the design solution. Our initial information gathering process does focus a lot on the building, and we need to find out, its physical size, what state it's in, how it's functioning now. But really, our process is equally about finding out how the building needs to support the people that are going to be using it. So, and the people that are going to be working in it on a day-to-day basis, people that will be visiting it or otherwise interacting with it. So it's more important for us to understand that than necessarily what the building is currently in. We can figure that out. So understanding how it needs to support the stakeholders in the future, that's really the focus. And we ensure that it's listening is really what it is. We're always giving that the highest level of attention. We've even changed our org chart to a table with chairs around it. So, we're all in on listening and a real collaborative process. Again, so early on, we were given, what seemed like unlimited access to Brandon's team. We asked lots of questions. We were certainly, trying to understand their specific requirements for the team, but also that, the communities that the center is going to serve. It was, very important. Having that access was very important so that we could learn everything that we could. So through this phase that we actually call the listening phase, and we call it that because it's really that simple. We listen. We have tools, and we use tools to kind of work through that, questionnaires and other forms of workshops and different agendas and things that we work through. And it's varied from project to project. It's a process, and it's flexible enough to work from project to project. But it's really important that on any project, kind of the most important thing is freeing your mind of any preconceptions or preconceived notions of how you think the space should look until you've actually listened to all the people that are going to be interacting with it long after you've left the project. So this rather recognizable graphic on the screen is really meant to show the importance of more than just the pre-design and the functional program into the schematic design. It's all these earliest phases. You have to keep listening, and because as you go through, you're going to have more questions and ask more elements from all the different stakeholders And that's where you're going to learn, and how you're going to have the right solution as you get through those projects or those phases. And it's really keeping those feedback loops open and having meaningful discussions later on and kind of finding the right solution. We had, for this project in particular, much later in the schematic design process than we would normally think, we had some really meaningful discussions that allowed us to look at materiality and form and really improve the project to what we're going to be showing you today. So developing intentional and effective feedback loops is also a really key tool that you need to use and keep those, keep the collaboration design working all the way through those phases. And in fact, even all the way through the project. So quick summary, what we actually did use for this project was, to listen and learn, was a core values questionnaire. So we developed those for the leadership group, and it was really trying to figure out the vision of the facility. But then we also have a series of departmental questionnaires, and those are really to get the detailed information about how each stakeholder group is going to work. We follow up all those questionnaires with interviews with everyone who filled them out, and we get further clarifications. We had set up some structured workshops, including all of the consultants, so we bring them all in. Everyone needs to know all of that information, so everyone's on the same footing. Moving into then bubble diagrams and schematic square bubbles as we go through, and we refine and iterate, and we get those feedback loops working, and that's really the last thing, is the feedback loops really do design, through those design phases, are key to the communication, so that you can keep, come to a successful completion of the project. I think we're gonna hand it over to Camille to speak about heritage.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the existing conditions and just all the characteristics of the building when we actually found it and came to site and visited for the first time. So just to give you a little bit of historical context, so in 1854, the Grand Trunk Railway was brought to northern Kingston. So because of the railway and the growing community, the area residents really petitioned the local school board to build a school. So what they did, kind of out of immediate need, was using an old freight shed. So as you can imagine, the conditions were not great. So the building that currently stands on our site was built as their permanent solution. So it was designed by architect John Power as the Frontenac School. So it was erected in a very prominent position at the corner of Montreal and Railway Streets between 1872 and 73. It was renamed the Depot School in 1896, and the City of Kingston purchased the property in 1970 upon the closure of the school, and the building became known as the Depot School Daycare Center for many years until the Social Housing Office took residence prior to KNCLN calling it their home. So this is the only historic photo we had for the project, and it's from 1937. And if you notice, just on the side of the roof line of the house there, you can see a tree poking out. So that's actually going to be important when Daryl comes back to talking about some of the net zero energy design and some of the challenges that we faced for the project. So the property became designated under the Ontario Heritage Act in 1976 and listed on the register in 2009. So for Canada's historic places, 610 Montreal Street and its heritage significance enriches the streetscapes of Montreal and Railway Streets and contributes to the overall cultural landscape of the community developed around the regional railway companies. So the design of this building really draws upon Ontario's 1860 guidelines, highlighting the importance of natural light and ventilation in educational facilities. So it was really kind of a turning point for this type of building. So the building is vernacular in style, and it showcases the exceptional quality of stonework that was procurable in mid-1870s Kingston. So the building is clad, well, not clad, it's a mass masonry building of Kingston limestone. So the walls are very robust and firmly grounded, but the building also possesses a modest elegance. So the east facade facing Montreal Street possesses the most significant architectural detail with its Georgian three-bay design with gable front and Italianate arched windows. So this next slide just really shows some of the character-defining elements that we really had to be mindful of going through the design process. So some of these kind of include the rectangular footprint of the building, the limestone water table circling the base of the building, coursed hammer-dressed limestone and flush coins at the building's corners. Their central 6-paneled wood entrance door kind of had a beautiful semicircular fan light and ashlar hood mold with the keystone and the carved label stops that you can see in that first image there. And then 6/6 double-hung sash windows with round arch tops on the main facade, and then flat arches and voussoirs on the secondary facades. And then finally, just wood brackets that extended underneath the gable end eaves. So, a less than sympathetic utilitarian concrete block addition was constructed sometime between 1966 and 78. It's a little bit difficult to tell from the city's aerial photos, but it really does obscure much of the west facade of the building. It contains mechanical and electrical spaces, a ground floor entrance vestibule, and a second floor exit stair that's just really used in emergency. So these next photos really show how KNCLN was using the space at the time we started the project. As Brandon's going to talk about in the next couple slides, like they really were using every inch of the building. So unfortunately, the interior heritage building was long stripped of the original character-defining elements, and no historic photos could be found to provide insight into what the original school interior would have been. So as mentioned before, the building does not contain thermal insulation, and the perimeter walls were built up with lath and plaster, a combination of wood and metal framing, and gypsum board. During previous site investigations, asbestos was found in the perimeter wall assemblies and ceiling and floor finishes. Additionally, lead paint was found on window and door frames and walls. So that's another layer of abatement and remediation that we kind of need to deal with in the project design. So the existing ground floor ceilings were acoustic ceiling tile dropped lower than the head of the original heritage windows. So it really created kind of like an awkward geometries around the perimeter walls and really made the space feel heavy and kind of darker than it really is or originally would have been. The second floor space was a little bit improved. So the ceilings were much higher, finished with gypsum board, and they were really following the slope of the attic above. So there was one interior staircase providing access between the floors, and then the exit stair in the addition that we'd mentioned earlier. So this photo was actually taken after one of our collaborative workshops. Unfortunately, we didn't have one of everybody around the table, but basically all of the consultants traveled to Kingston to meet with KNCLN's team and really review all those findings of the questionnaires and interviews that Daryl just talked about. So moving on to the existing site, the easement that was in favor of the CP Railway provided direct access to an adjacent brick factory and railway maintenance yard. The easement and many pockets of soil in the project site contained elevated levels of typical metals found on former railway lands, which require significant remediation to finally allow KNCLN to begin to use the site for their traditional ways of being. So the site was quite sparse, with the exception of 3 mature trees, a gravel parking lot, and a large paved asphalt area adjacent to the building. So it really was a blank canvas to kind of allow us to think sky's the limit of how we really wanted the site to be designed for just to maximize your programming and everything that they wish and hope that the site could be. So now we're just going to move along to some functional program. I'm going to pass it to Brandon for just the next 2 to just talk about how you currently use the space.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. So as Camille said, yeah, we've used every inch of that space to the point where we started thinking about bunk bed desks, and they're not safe. So the new space, when we started talking and we're even in the listening phase, I think one of the things that I'll kind of go on a tangent on is that we actually felt heard, which I feel like is often enough. We say we need to listen, but to actually hear the client and to hear an Indigenous voice in this time was something that was, I think, unfortunately odd, but something that was really happy that happened here. So the space is tiny. We've had to chop it up to fit offices. We have multi-purposes rooms. We use every inch we possibly can, but like we said, there's some significant challenges there. Next slide, please. some things that we haven't been able to use in the space is we haven't been able to host fire. We haven't been able to garden directly into the land. And so these opportunities coming up are very exciting. And one of the things that we're also quite excited for is an increased space for our sharing center, our Adeya. There's an Anishinaabe word there, which my Anishinaabe is quite bad, so I won't try. But a space for folks to come and gather the supplies that they need to survive. Montreal Street and Railway that space is quite a challenging space, I think, within the city, and sees instances of poverty and shelter use around the area. And so the KNCLN has had the opportunity to support people with that sharing center. Next slide, please.
All right, so I'm going to jump back in. Just talking a little bit about spatial adjacencies and kind of how we started putting all this information together. So here you can see our bubble diagram. It really was quite a task to kind of incorporate so many functions into such a small heritage building with a very hard limit for the size of addition that we could build. So we began by working through the adjacencies of spaces to determine how the facility could really function as a whole. So in our bubble diagram here, you can see that we really group like the exterior, ground, and second floor spaces. And even though like our final design has really, evolved from this initial exploration, the approach has remained the same. So basically we have multi-purpose and classroom spaces kind of centered as the hub of the facility. And then we have physical and acoustic separation of offices and quiet spaces. So I think Brandon just mentioned some of the outdoor programming that's going to be included. Some of them I think that we didn't quite mention were like the children's play area. We have a space dedicated for like a future sweat lodge. We have the terrace planting beds for food and medicinal plantings. The ceremonial fire. We have an outdoor kitchen. One of the requests was to be able to use for like hide workshops, naturalized landscaping, bicycle parking. So a few of the other kind of functional aspects to the site that we've added were just having like electrical vehicle ready parking spaces. So incorporating that infrastructure at present and just making sure that our systems can handle the extra loads. Bicycle parking, also storage to support the garden and play activities, and then having some enclosed waste collection. So improving interior and exterior accessibility was really a key focus in the project scope. So some of the ways that we're going to be achieving this are introducing accessible parking, having new accessible ramping on the site connecting the municipal sidewalks to the building's entrances. So we don't have that as present. It's quite a disconnect, and there's steps to get up and different things like that. Also going to be adding an additional barrier-free building entrance, barrier-free washroom facilities, and introducing a Lula elevator to provide full accessibility to all floors and spaces. So now I'm gonna, actually Daryl and I will share this one here. Okay.
Just give me a moment here.
Hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so as Brendan and Camille just gone over all of the outdoor amenities, I think what really drove through the functional program and the workshops and the design phases, it was all that feedback really helped us come up with what was our design solution. And I think as we went through and we poured over all of the different elements and that were kind of mentioned and discussed, the one idea that really resonated and still resonates was that the space should be beautiful and intentional. And we found this quote from architect David Adjaye, and we really feel like it captures the approach that we took to it and KNCLN's desires for the space. And buildings are deeply emotive structures which form our psyche. People think they are just things we maneuver through, but the makeup of a person is influenced by the nature of spaces. So we really like that quote. So we kind of ended up framing our architectural design challenge as trying to seamlessly weave two sides of time to a 150-year-old heritage building. So on one side, we have thousands of years of Indigenous language, culture, and spiritual practices. In the middle is our building, which is classified as heritage, as it relates to today. And then on the other side, we have, the challenge of creating, a modern, distinct addition while also rehabilitating that heritage building to meet today's accessibility and net zero energy requirements. So it's quite a challenge.
So the nest, as we like to refer to it, serves many Indigenous communities. So one of the conversations we had with Brandon and kind of throughout the design process was that they really felt that a design leaning towards widespread common symbolisms rather than specific Indigenous iconography was really key. So our approach to this was through a meaningful selection of wood species, ceremonial fire circle, and circular settings for ceremonies, learning, and teaching, and a focus on nature and a naturalized site with abundant trees, winding stone pathways, wildflowers, and tall grasses. So we made design decisions and material selections that made connections between the heritage characteristics and representation of multiple Indigenous cultures in modern design. So really our key drivers were biophilic materials, again, the circular and organic forms to provide a visual and spatial distinction from the rectilinear heritage building while speaking to the cultural values shared across some of those Indigenous peoples. So we started the concept design of the new addition, which was bound to 45 square meters to meet the GICB grant requirements. So basically the new addition, it couldn't be larger than 30% of the footprint of the additional building, which was already quite small. So in total, it brought our gross floor area to 350 square meters. So we first began with a few design iterations with a rectilinear addition with similar proportions to the heritage building. But through the design workshop process and those feedback loops that we talked about, KNCLN asked us to explore circular spaces to really reflect the importance of circular structures and ceremonies and gatherings and interactions. So this design shift was really welcomed by us because it prompted echoing, sweeping curved design elements in the fire circle canopy and the site layout that you're going to see in the next few slides.
Yeah, so here's the site plan. You can see the rectangular footprint of the heritage structure, and then the new rounded footprint of the addition. We tried to minimize the actual connection between the two and minimize the connection to the heritage building. And we pulled it away a little bit with a smaller corridor structure so that we could also allow some light to pass through there and making that a distinct piece where it transitions from the heritage structure to the addition. As you can see, the main focal point on the site is the fire circle. It is aligned right outside of the building on axis. And we've got the hard and soft landscaping that we've talked about, including the winding path that leads from the fire circle to the children's area. I think we've noted the location for the sweat lodge, the future outdoor classroom as well was fit in there, and then the gardens over on the right-hand side. That's the garden area for the planting of the traditional medicines.
Actually, I'm just going to add one thing that we
Sure.
forgot to mention. So if you're wondering how that angle came about, that's kind of bisecting the site. So really, when speaking with KNCLN, they like to enter fire circles from the east. So that's really that eastern access to enter the fire circles is really driving the angular directions on the site.
Ignore the north arrow, it's not right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did actually include some fencing. It was mostly open, but fencing around with cedar material through around the children's area for safety. So we add the roof structure to the plan. You can see that you can have the fire circle canopy and the addition each have PV panels on it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in more detail. Then as we get into some renderings, we're going to walk around the building. We're just starting construction, so renderings we'll have to do for today. So when we walk around the building, the first rendering is really the new design of the building, but it's really the heritage facade of the Montreal Road, or the Montreal Street, sorry. And you can see there's where the grassed area was in front is the terraced growing beds, and they're also accessible in their design. There's some sloping areas and lower heights. And that'll be, as we mentioned before, growing food, traditional medicines. And actually, sorry, if you can only just see, if you look in the middle, there's a little bit of the canopy sticking out, and that's really by design from the heritage perspective. They wanted to kind of reestablish that facade on Montreal Street. So now as we shift around to the corner of Montreal and Railway Streets, you can see the masonry restoration work was done again on that facade, but the North Heritage facade. But actually in the foreground, you can see that connection. You can see where the sidewalk used to end. It ended right at the intersection, and it was really hard to, as a pedestrian, to access the building. If you had any mobility needs, you had to come by car essentially to get into the building. So this is a real improvement that we've done here up to the barrier free. You can see there are some subtle column lights, so they're kind of lower height, as well as some bollard lights looking at for night safety, which we have a rendering to look at those as well. And again, here on this, from this vantage point, you just see the addition kind of peeking out from the back. Again, very much by design, because the addition is really meant to be subordinate to the main heritage structure. So now here we'll go around, and we finally arrived to get a full view of the new addition and the fire circle canopy. You can kind of see the building's new entrance is clad in black wood siding to really give it a differentiation and a separation. So that, that's the main entrance, but it shows that there's a separation between the two structures. For the addition itself, we chose gray wood cladding. It's a weathered gray spruce fir. Again, that materiality we find kind of it complements the stone, but also still remaining kind of subordinate to the stone as the main structure. But then that's contrasted with the brighter cedar tones underneath the soffit, under the entrance canopy in the fire circle curved timber canopy. We've also created some benches around the fire circle, and and you can see the low cedar fences for the children's area in the back. Okay, so here is the building rendered at night. So we did want the site lighting to play a role in the design. We're hoping that the site will come alive at night when there is after dark or evening programming, but really just complement the natural flickering light generated from the fire. We do have some grazing light on the heritage facade itself, and as well as we've added some other kind of accent lighting, including around the curved top of the addition to kind of highlight the curvature itself, but then also kind of lighten up the feel of the canopy. And again, we tried to downplay the fixtures themselves and really have the building and the shapes be the star of the show and play against the heritage facades.
Okay. So moving on to the interior of the building now, the final ground floor plan is arranged into 3 zones. So the new accessible main entrance is located within the addition with a vestibule entrance for coat hanging and stroller parking. To the left, you can see the enlarged sharing center, which is the Gabinamindamin. That's what Brandon was mentioning earlier. With increased storage of clothing, personal hygiene, and food items. The outdoor kitchen is nestled in the negative space carved out between the 2 volumes. To the right, as you enter the heritage structure through an existing opening through the mass masonry wall. The first zone contains utility areas, the new Lula lift, access to the new exit stair, universal washroom and unisex washrooms. And really this zone acts kind of as a circulation, kind of back of house area, also as a buffer to the noise or activity happening in the neighboring areas. So a glazed door provides a threshold to the hub of the ground floor functional program. An opening teaching kitchen overlooks the large multi-purpose space and lounge. The teaching kitchen is really meant to provide traditional cultural and everyday modern cooking skills to KNCLN's clientele. The kitchen and lounge area are really designed to support each other's functions, where food preparing during the classes can be shared among other program groups. So the second floor has been arranged with quieter functions to the east of the building, gradually leading to noisier activities to the west. In the west here, you can see the multi-purpose classroom that takes up the entire footprint of the addition. So this geometry of the space lends itself to those circular seating and flexibility for varying activities. So now the second floor is accessed through the new exit stair, which is bathed in natural daylight. The stair is really designed with the same quality of woodwork and interior finishes found throughout the building, and it really will function as the main vertical circulation throughout the space. So the stair leads to the open central corridor, and this zone also contains a tea nook, a barrier-free washroom, and other service spaces. So to the east, we have offices for the executive director and staff grouped to one side, with a flex space for volunteers nestled at one end of the corridor, centered on the feature arched window. A quiet room and library are immediately adjacent, and this room kind of doubles an acoustically private space where sensitive meetings can be held with clientele. So our interior concept design was really inspired. Sorry, something just happened on my. Okay, was inspired by the Canadian landscapes and by the sage plant. So the primary goal was to use this inspiration to unite the sense of history and place with elements holding importance to both Indigenous cultures and heritage materiality. So now I'm going to start to go through why we've made some of those selections and how we've been able to tie them to both. So first, heritage paint colors were selected that speak to the natural elements of earth, air, water, and wood to act as a complementary canvas for vibrant Indigenous artwork and cultural display items. Sage, as a sacred plant, is a medicine traditionally used for purification and cleansing in the act of smudging. The plant contains varying beautiful shades of soft greens, creamy whites, and mauves. So these tones were included in the selected heritage paint colors. And finally, biophilic materials found in the surrounding nature, namely local wood species with indigenous cultural significance, such as spruce, fir, birch, pine, and cedar, were selected. Many of these local woods would have been used in the 1873 construction of the original stone schoolhouse. So interior finishes were also carefully chosen to bridge that gap between the heritage conservation and sensibilities of Indigenous cultures. So new birch hardwood floors will be present throughout the space. So we know that hardwood is not really the first choice for modern public buildings, but we felt it was really appropriate in this case. The original schoolhouse would have been constructed with hardwood planks, and it also gives a sense of warmth for some of the Indigenous activities and sitting on the floor, in circular fashions. So it was also, again, notable heritage care defining element that was paramount to the rehabilitation. So we selected birch for its durability, the warm tones, and its connection to Haudenosaunee and other local Indigenous peoples. The birch tree, its leaves, bark, and sap were traditionally used for fabricating canoes, cladding dwelling structures, crafting, and medicinal purposes. The selection of floor and wall tiles was visually driven by earthy tones, natural veining, and geometric patterns reminiscent of wampum and traditional Indigenous beadwork patterns. Tile installation was driven by Victorian honeycomb floor patterns and bathroom wall tile proportions. So accents of cedar wood, particularly in the feature walls and ceilings, and exterior fencing elements nod towards many cultures using cedar for spiritual, medicinal, and construction purposes. Although none of the original door and window casings survived, the windows bore a watered-down version of a traditional wood window stool and apron, as would have been originally constructed. So because this was a schoolhouse, these elements would have been quite modest, without ornate profiles. So here's our strategy to fill in the gaps. We opted to go with casings that were designed to Victorian proportions, with corner and plinth blocks and wall-based detailing fabricated from modern dimensional pine lumber with square edge profiles. So the heritage time period of the building is acknowledged in a general fashion with clearly distinguishable new fabric without the potential of introducing erroneous replications. So it's believed that the existing plastic laminate windowsills and aprons included in a previous interior fit-up attempted a similar approach, yet with an incongruous material. So similar profiles will be recreated in dressed and painted pine. So this first concept rendering shows the ground floor multi-purpose room and teaching kitchen, which illustrates some of these design strategies used to align the Indigenous representation in the heritage fabric that I just mentioned. So again, here you can see those birch floors and cedar slat fixtures. A unique light fixture with birds perched on a branch hands over the kitchen peninsula. So this light fixture was something that KNCLN immediately responded to because birds carry language in some Indigenous cultures. Feature light fixtures were chosen that were fabricated from curved segments of wood reminiscent of traditional basket weaving. In the background there, you can kind of see the glazed 6-panel heritage wood doors that kind of echo some of those entrance doors that are still in the building, but with modern profiles. So the overall design of the addition is a modern approach with materiality sympathetic to the heritage structure. So this rendering shows the expanded Gabinamindamin housed in the new addition with built-in storage. So this room will be flooded with natural daylight, giving space a light and airy atmosphere. The curved facade is echoed in the round counter-height island, fit with cubbies for display and storage of stocked items. A circular ceiling feature will used to showcase Indigenous artwork, and from this hangs a metal chandelier formed of leaf-like petals. Warm natural wood tones have been selected for the millwork and open shelving. And this final interior rendering highlights the second floor classroom in the addition. Panoramic glazing provides abundant views to the new site design and all its natural elements. At the interface with the existing building, the heritage limestone facade remains exposed, juxtaposed with new heavy timber structural members. The curved facade of the addition is reflected in the circular feature ceiling that is inlaid with timber, which is oriented to north, south, east, and west, as they would if forming part of a traditional Indigenous medicine wheel. We also have some lunar light pendants that hang from the center of this feature. So over time, many interventions have been implemented to improve the performance of the original wood windows and exterior doors. On the ground floor, so the existing wood window assembly, so they had aluminum storm windows, the heritage double hung windows, and then they'd all been sealed shut with 6 millimeters of acrylic sheet screwed in place, like completely sealing the window opening, so you couldn't open them at all. On the second floor, you still had the aluminum storms, the heritage windows, and then interior in-swing wood sill sashes had been added at some point to kind of increase thermal performance. So Daryl's going to talk about this a little bit more when we get into some of the net zero design. Oops. So this slide here just kind of shows our process of the heritage rehabilitation of these windows. It's going to be quite extensive, so they're all going to be removed from the building, and they're going to include stripping of all the lead paint finishes, missing and replacing missing and rotting wood. And then the most important thing that we will be doing is replacing all the glazing putty for improved air tightness. To these windows, we're going to be adding interior passive house rated tilt and turn wood sill sashes that will contribute toward the net zero energy targets. So Stantec structural conservation engineers formed part of the consultant team and performed an in-depth masonry review to assess the condition of the aged mass masonry walls. So we conducted additional site investigations, and we arranged to dig test pits at the building's foundations, remove masonry units from the exterior walls, and cut interior exploratory openings to survey the masonry cracking, the condition of mortar joints, and the presence of moisture levels. So this opportunity was also taken to confirm the wall's construction. So basically it's a double wythe wall with rubble core, and it's 650 millimeters thick. So it's pretty substantial what we're working with here. So the above grade masonry was found to be relatively dry from both sides. However, the limestone was displaying a common defect of Kingston limestone. So basically, you can see throughout when you see photos of the building, there are vertical cracks that occur perpendicular to the bedding planes. So these cracks become points of air and moisture infiltration and are concerning if they grow to moderate width where they invite freeze-thaw damage. So many incompatible modern cementitious mortar fixes were implemented over time. The mortars, so these cementitious mortars really promoted to further stone deterioration by trapping moisture within the walls. So CSV joined Stantec's structural team on site for these additional site investigations, as did LHC Consulting, our archaeology team, who reviewed these test pits for artifacts of historical and cultural significance. So we actually didn't find anything in the test pits, so we were kind of able to move on to the next phase. So here I've just included some of Stantec's detailing, but really one of the major approach to restoring the masonry is repointing, dismantling and reconstructing the chimney, which is leaning, replicating it with the existing materials that we have, so cataloging all the materials that were removed, and repairing step cracking to the corners of the building that were kind of quite severe, and then in situ pinning of some of the dressed stone. So with this, I'm going to pass it on to Daryl, who's going to really talk about our net zero energy approach.
Yeah, so repointing of the stone is probably a really good segue. Just gonna get myself lined up here. Yeah, when you're looking at a net zero strategy for a heritage building or any project really, we always start with the envelope. In particular for high performance buildings, that's really key for the heritage or any renovation project. In fact, determining what is really feasible from an economic but also a constructability perspective is often a really challenging balance. Airtightness is really the biggest bang for your buck that you can get for initial energy reduction on any project. And the heritage stone repairs, in particular on this project, repairs and repointing are contributing to both both of our weather protection, but also our air tightness in certain spots of the building. So do not underestimate the value. I know the costs are often quite high, but it's really important. It's critical for protecting the stone for weather infiltration. Often we do combine our air tightness and vapor control in one layer, which we've done in the strategy for the addition. This section on the slide here, we're showing our air tightness line through with the red line, and weather protection with the blue. I think when you're looking at the addition, it's pretty straightforward. But one thing I did want to point out, it kind of ties in with the flooring that Camille was mentioning. We looked at a lot of ways to try and bring our air tightness in the heritage building, kind of in the crawl space, which is where you'd probably traditionally expect to find it. But it was too costly and constructible. We were going to have to basically take the whole building apart. So we've established a solution that puts it above the existing floorboards, but in a sandwich underneath the new flooring that's coming in. So we are definitely going to be watching the installation of that go in carefully to make sure that we get a good air seal at the floor of the heritage building. Another solution we went through a lot of design iterations is the insulation strategy inside of the heritage building. We went back and forth with the amount of insulation, as well as we were trying to figure out dew points and moisture control and damage that could be caused with the annual freeze-thaw cycles. So we are really fortunate to have the ability in-house to do these therm models. It really gives us some real-time design assist and helps us come to decisions a lot faster. We can really quickly assess diminishing returns on insulation thicknesses and right size those assemblies for both performance and cost. So that's quite an important thing for us. You can also see, we're looking at impacts of where the thermal line is with the windows and different ways that's going to affect the project. I'm going to go into a little bit more about the heritage building shortly as well. So here are the assemblies that we, for both the heritage and the addition that we landed on. As you can see, we actually landed on a fairly low thermal value in the heritage building at R15. It was enough to curb a fair amount of the energy loss in the wintertime, but also keep the stone from any risk. In addition, we really went with a pretty typical high performance approach for that one. Strong thermal resistance, that one landed at R48. And we implemented a lot of our techniques that we do in passive house buildings, including R24 in the slab and R52 in the roof. If we move to the window sections, there we go. The new addition, you see again a pretty modern approach. We have our air tightness layer going through. We've attached our windows to the air tightness layer with a flexible tape. It's pretty much how we do that on kind of all of our high performance projects. And then, as you saw in the therm image, and I guess we kind of the cat's out of the bag, we were trying to balance all of the investigations, and really we went through a lot of iterations on the window design in the heritage building. We looked at trying to balance air tightness, but also heritage rehabilitation, and budget again comes back into play. We went through kind of looking at anything and everything that we could think of. We looked at improving the heritage windows themselves. We looked at different locations of the thermal layer, as I was showing in the therm models. We also, even got pricing for high performance replicas, heritage replicas of the windows. Everything was considered but scrutinized through each lens, and ultimately, as was mentioned earlier, we opted for refurbishing the heritage windows, reinstalling them in place, and then adding the high performance window in line with the thermal. So again, we're looking at all these different options and evaluating priorities as we go through this process, and energy reduction and heritage preservation landed a lot higher on the list than the budget. And so the budget took the hit on this one, and we invested in put extra funds into the windows. So just moving through the rest of to the next step in our process, now that we have a good grasp. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just.
Oh, now we.
Sorry, it was
Yeah,
sticking.
yeah, no worries. We really start to engage with the mechanical and electrical engineering team, and we'll get there. I think what's important once you understand what you can do with the envelope is try and find the best fit of a mechanical and electrical system that will then be the most efficient for that given project. There's no silver bullet out there, but we do try and implement by matching the two, a use less first kind of approach, and pairing mechanical systems with the envelopes that we can achieve. And that's important on every project, but really important on a net zero project. Again, on smaller projects and smaller sites, it's really hard to find space for the PV panel, realistically. And so if you use a lot less energy first and you get your total energy use down, then the PV panels have a fighting chance to hit the targets for net zero. For this project, the system that we landed on was a dedicated outdoor air ERV, one for the whole building, and then combine those with heat pump fan coil units delivering heating and cooling, and that seemed to be the most effective. But you can see on this slide that there was a lot of coordination with the mechanical and electrical teams to fit everything into this building. It was quite a challenge to get all that equipment in with the limited space that we did have, and all the heritage considerations of venting and everything else. But it is an all-electric solution, so that does also, it also helped Kingston move towards their carbon reduction goals. And so they are up on the screen, but if you are interested in the numbers, total energy use is modeled at 32,400 kilowatt hours per year. Our energy use intensity was 102 kilowatt hours per meter square per year, and our greenhouse gas intensity is 9.7. So we ended up being pretty happy with those numbers. So now that we have the total energy sorted out, we jumped into the photovoltaic array design. We explored, a lot of different options. Again, trying to find anywhere we could put it would make some sense. But some of those were some fairly uncomfortable discussions, such as putting PV panels on the heritage roof, which we did not support. Camille wanted me to make sure I said that. But on the slide, you'll see, some of the images. Just we pulled them out of the PV modeling report. As I said, it is really hard to find enough space at all. But then you run the numbers, and it's even harder to find places that actually have good generation on your site. So, as was mentioned, already in 1937, there was a fairly large tree on the south property of the neighbor's property to the south. And it is still around and at least 100 years old and has a trunk diameter of 4 feet. So it was a significant impact on the PV efficiency on our site. So if we move to the next slide, on the 5 locations that we did look at, we had, not all of them were viable. So we looked at even some vertical face on the addition, and those just were not usable for the low yield that they put in there. The heritage roofs also had very low yields, a lot of heritage concerns, as well as we were going to have to reinforce the whole roof system, the truss system inside to carry the new load. So that was off the table, and that left us with 3 locations and it's on the addition itself, so and on the canopy around the fire circle, and a car park, or like a covered area over the parking lot at the north side of the site. And as you can see by the numbers, if you're interested in the numbers, those 3 areas do actually put us into net positive territory with the low energy use of the building. However, as we head into construction, you'll notice that the current project only includes 2 of the arrays, so over the canopy structure and on the addition. And this will get us to approximately 40% net zero, so not quite the target we were looking at. However, we have put in all the infrastructure. It's in the design. There's space for it. There's conduits. So we're really hoping there's going to be a phase 2, because that location really was making up about 60%. It was the highest yield of the areas. So hopefully the budget will be found, and there'll be another phase, and we can get this up to net positive. But it'll be easy to do. So I'll just do a quick recap. So the summary for our net zero strategies, again, we always start with the envelope and air tightness. Best bang for your buck, but even on this project, we had 2 different approaches for the different structures. Similar for the windows, make sure you have really good windows. And we described the 2 options, or 2 strategies we did for this project. Reducing your energy, working really well collaboratively with your mechanical electrical team. Use less first. That's the way to go. And then obviously the photovoltaic on site and the different locations, you have to get them modeled, because they're not all going to be as good as the other. But really what we're hoping the takeaway for the net zero design strategy on this project is that despite we're renovating a stone building with, from the 1870s, this project can achieve net positive energy using current known technologies. So you just need to have a collaborative approach and design for it. So on that note, I'm going to pass it back to Ruth and Brandon to speak a little bit about community building.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say I really appreciate all the detail and all the, I hope this is, I think this speaks to, the care and the connections that have been made in the process, but also the creativity and trying to solve problems that are so multi-layered, from obviously kind of redeveloping a heritage site, a partner with wonderful ideas around use and future use, and the realities of a city. I think for this, Brandon and I were chatting, I think the first part I want to share is kind of from my municipal perspective, or the role that I play as a staff at the City of Kingston. And when I think about the topic of reshaping communities, and obviously the building that we're talking about today, I really think that this speaks to an opportunity for myself and my colleagues that work for municipal governments or provincial governments or federal governments to really look at how do we look at our surplus buildings or land, and rethink with partners, with community, like what would be the best use and the best kind of approach to reshape our infrastructure. I know I often talk with my colleagues, like it's not always the easy approach. That would be a greenfield and a new build and done. But I think with these types of projects, you really have the opportunity to repurpose something that already has a lot of history and heritage. And really, I think it speaks volumes that we're able to rebuild or reshape this building into an Indigenous space. And that's sometimes tough too. And I know we're all having different perspectives and different history and different identities. But I think it's been a really interesting project. I will speak from kind of the city's lens where with my colleagues, again, I'm the director of one department, but it's really also been that internal learning together, working with my colleagues in the facilities and construction team, the heritage team, the planners, communication, engagement, like it's really multifaceted even within our municipality. And it's brought us all kind of, I think, really together in kind of how we rethink and reimagine projects. I think the first, as I showed on my initial slide, like the first physical project that we worked on was in the middle of a pandemic, where we took a bit of a risk and we bought a building because we needed housing, and we had a very specific direction to develop housing for Indigenous people. And it was kind of scary, and I know I wrote the council report and you're not sure, but now we have 20 people that have a safe place to sleep at night. So I think it's like from a municipal perspective, and if you work with municipalities and you have that conversation, I think it is really important to understand that kind of the relationship and the relationship building and the time that it takes to kind of walk on that journey together is critical. And before I pass it back to Brandon, I want to speak to kind of what's ahead, because obviously this project, we're just getting started on the construction, and I'm sure there's going to be problems and issues, and we already spoke about cost and cost escalation, and I will say that we've worked very closely in kind of addressing those things and looking at ways to balance budget and realities. But as you've heard, KNCLN is a group that's growing fast with lots of much needed services. So we're also, while we're working on this project, also imagining kind of what's next, or what are other needs for our Indigenous colleagues. And so we are working on also what's kind of the long term, or what's the additional spaces that we can work on, again, with our existing kind of city properties or city land. So, and again, I think this leads, it's part of a path that we're on, and this is, I think, a perfect example of overcoming challenges and issues, but also working alongside with the same vision, and I think build friendship and understanding. So, Brandon, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you, Ruth. Yeah, Reshaping Communities, I mentioned earlier that this space in Kingston is one that comes with significant challenges. And something that's really cool about this project, and even in the process of being heard, was it communicated to not only to myself and to my team, but to the community, is that we're worth it. And that's something that's not often communicated or discussed, is that we're actually worth this project. So the idea that there's, even to see the renderings there, it fills me with joy, because my community doesn't often get to experience that. And so the wampum here is quite intentional. That's one dish, one spoon, and that's what we have to work together. And I think this has just been a really cool, tangible evidence of professional reconciliation. Reconciliation is needed now, and we need to start doing it now, but it's a slow process. And so if anybody were ever interested in collaborating and dreaming this way, I don't think if we were to say that 2-3 years ago, they'd be sitting on a stage with these folks, I don't think I would have been capable of thinking of that, just because of how distant this type of idea, and it's such a beautiful building, could be even possible. And so I think I'm quite excited. And this idea that we're actually worth it has been something that has just been carried through and has really actually given even my own team hope as we continue to carry on the work and benefit their community. So thank you, and thank you all.
So I'm just going to finish off with a few key takeaways. So just working on this project over the last 2 years, we really found success by forming those partnerships based on trust. And we listened, we collaborated, we continued to explore what we receive in those feedback loops. And again, that's going to keep happening throughout construction, and we're not done yet. We keep striving to find that common ground between the heritage character defining elements and the Indigenous materiality embedded in cultural values. We balance technical requirements of the building and KNCLN's programming, and we use innovation and iteration to target those high performance goals. So just looking back to the goals that were set out in the city's RFP, we really remain excited for the space to be that focus of cultural and land connection and strengthening of community. Thank you. So if there are any questions, we have a few minutes left.
Hello. Thank you, I guess, for the presentation. It's a very cool kind of insertion into the city of Kingston. It's kind of very exciting. I was just wondering, I guess, in the context of this, or the expanse of the heritage of the building, we spoke earlier about the heritage of the Indigenous culture on the land, and how far back that spans, how long the original building has lasted. I wonder if you can speak to the life expectancy of the addition with regards to the choice of materials, or if perhaps that was part of the communication or feedback loop to kind of perhaps anticipate that this building might last 25, 50 years, unlike the kind of 200-year building, and that maybe that will, as part of the culture, to kind of recycle or reinvigorate the addition down the line.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think any or each of us could probably jump in a little bit on that. I mean, I can speak to the design of the addition was, we always are trying to do durable buildings that will last, beyond 50 at least years. But yeah, there is a lot of wood involved or included in the design, so there are elements that probably could be repaired. There's a lot of different cultures that do, look at, continual repair of those types of materials. I would say it was the selection of the materials that I tried to mention in some of the slides about, and Camille also mentioned, getting input on importance of certain materials being representative, across, a lot of different groups and being important to a lot of different groups. So I think perhaps that's part of it. I'm not sure if you want to talk about the heritage aspect.
One thing I'll mention too is the City of Kingston's facility teams were part of our regular project meetings. So like every meeting that we had when we were talking about these things and choosing materials, that was always part of the discussion. How is this going to be maintained? And they're putting their views on how they're going to be able to upkeep over time. Even in terms of access and how we're getting to certain areas. So all of these things were kind of thought out along the way in collaboration with Ruth's colleagues at the city. Yeah.
And maybe to add to that, I think from a user, and I know Brandon and I work very closely together, as I mentioned kind of in my closing, on we know need and use will continue to evolve and grow. And I know that maybe it's not so much the life cycle of the building, more than the need of the building. But I think, again, I don't want to speak for Brandon, but I think what we see evolve is the language nest kind of function, and the need for that, I think, is very, we feel that that's going to be a very robust need and use in that space for a long, a long future. From a kind of a social planning and urban planning kind of lens, I can see that there's going to be potentially multiple, Indigenous spaces that might in the community that will be connected in a way. So I think that's maybe more from the bird's eye like tenant use. And I should say, like, the city owns the building, and KNCLN is the tenant. So again, there's a really close kind of relationship. And that's also a conversation, obviously, like, what's the future of that? What does that look like? We're talking about, I mean, not necessarily specifically for this space, but we're talking about land trusts and kind of giving like space like back to Indigenous communities. So I think it's a interesting question from different angles.
I don't think I can say anything that would really add. The Haudenosaunee means they make houses, and so would be one of them, I guess, would be my answer. Yeah.
Any other questions? I see some hands. I think there was one up front. Oh, yeah.
Test, test. Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay.
Hello?
Oh,
Right there somewhere.
you are. Out there. Yeah.
Is it my turn, or should I pass it to someone?
No, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I really like the details, and those tables were very detailed, explaining about how much energy was used and so forth. But my question was about what are the factors that led to the decision of using or going with the shape of organic and curvy shape instead of going something that matches the original building, which is straight rectangular shape?
So I can speak a little bit about that one. So again, as I mentioned, really like the questionnaires and feedback loops in the design workshops that we've had with KNCLN and the teams and a lot of their team members, one of the driving factors that they really came up with was having that circular space for gathering. So that's really where you're seeing like a lot of the curves coming in. So the fire circle was circular. They wanted the circular seating inside of the addition for the classroom and learning areas for teaching and languages. So really that is what generated it. And really, it allowed us to come out of those preconceived notions of what we thought it should look like. And it was a direct response of those conversations with KNCLN.
So there's a distinct, like the subordinate shape on the heritage side as well, right?
Yep.
It really reinforces.
A contrast, yeah, contrast as well.
Hi, thanks. Well, I really appreciate that presentation. It's excellent, and the level of details is amazing. Well, I could see that the liberal thinking of the city of Kingston is really great there, because I'm involved into some heritage building in York region, and so I'm really curious about the architectural language, similar to the previous questions. The new addition of the semicircular, and particularly the window type and the overhang of the new addition is quite unique, it's quite original. So
Yeah.
I'm just would like to hear a little bit more about this. Thanks.
So maybe I could talk a little bit about the heritage approvals process. We went through a lot of rounds of questions. The heritage team was really excited about this, actually.
Very collaborative.
Very collaborative. Like I was having direct emails with like the heritage planner from the city, and it was really an involved process. And you know, there were points in times where things they wanted us to adjust a little bit, like that overhang. We actually reoriented and re-angled it so that you were seeing it a little bit less from Railway Street and Montreal Street. So there were tweaks and things along the way where they wanted it to be tucked a little bit more behind. So that kind of leads back to when we were first looking at the renderings, how you can't really see it too much from Montreal Street, which is the real main heritage facade. And then as you come around the building, you start seeing it peek out a little bit more. And then when you come all the way along Railway, that's when you can really, you know, see the, I guess, the full extent of it. So it really was a back and forth between us and the city throughout the process for those considerations. Another thing was there were originally we had fencing that was a little bit more extensive around the property, and so they really worked with us to see what those designs were and make sure that we still had that visibility through to the heritage facades at different angles. And you know, we went through different design iterations to kind of meet those requirements.
And I think we mentioned the not very sympathetic addition that was put on in the 70s, and kind of taking that off and, you know, restoring the heritage structure itself to a little bit more of its original dignity, but then having that addition, and it's modern, and it speaks more to the purpose-built use. We found it worked really well, and highlighting wood and using light as well in the evenings and things like that to bring it to life. So it was really meant to have a vibrant element to it. I mean, one of the things was moving the entrance to that area is also a key part of that design process that we went through, and making that entrance between the two as the main entrance, and eliminating the need for extra staircases. And because even though we were expanding the footprint, the program was expanding faster than the building was expanding, and still is expanding faster. So yeah, I think that was part of all that design process. And again, we were going back and forth, and yeah, we got deep into the design, like schematic design, with more rectilinear shape, and yeah, we just we were listening a bit more, and it was great. It was a great couple of discussions that we had, and said, all right, we'll investigate that form.
So I think we have time for one more question. I don't know if there is one. Saw some hands before.
And then while we're looking for the other question, I'll add on to that last part.
Okay.
The fire space as well, I think that overhang, it communicates that this is all, even though the fire space is maybe not necessarily an architectural building, is a real functional part of our program, that it ought to be considered as part, at least from a program perspective. And so I think having that overhang there really communicates that this is all one part, that this space is actually being used functionally for all these different programs. And so it's a really important part for programming and for the people that were there. But fancy architect tech, I don't understand.
Okay. Oh. I saw just one last one over there. I don't know.
Reconciliation, right? The more difficult route that's been taken to not choose a greenfield site and to rehabilitate a colonial building and marry it with KNCLN. So that in itself a wonderful expression of reconciliation. So congratulations. So the question is more, the question then is, I think you referred earlier, Brandon, to 85% of Indigenous community living in the city versus the 15 in the reservation. And I don't know if that refers to Kingston, the local community, or in general. But I'm just wondering how, the architecture itself as an expression of that, in a way, of kind of hybridized or shifting identity of the Indigenous community is reflective of that of the reservation, or just what the relationship is, in terms of also connection back to generations, including elders, whether they live in the city or on the reservation.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a reason we didn't put the 85% on the slide, because I'm sure someone would outfact me. But so 85% is of all Indigenous folk in Ontario, they tend to gravitate towards the city center, and so there's not enough support. So I think this space does a really good job of communicating the multinational aspect of Kingston. We attract a lot of different people in a very complicated community due to corrections as well as education and healthcare. Corrections and healthcare are less exciting, and I think speak to a legacy of colonialism. But that having all the different artifacts and tokens and iconography from these different nations is expressed really quite beautifully. Birch, the circles, the birds, all these different items touch on different parts from the different nations that are represented in Kingston as best as we could.
Okay, so I think that's time. Thank you.
So on behalf of everyone here, we wish you well with the next part of your journey. We're looking forward to hearing more about the project as it comes into fruition and you occupy and you enjoy. So very much appreciate the thoughtfulness and the insightfulness of the way in which you've presented here today. Very well done. Miigwech. And that's a wrap. So thank you all for being part of our 2025 conference, and we look forward to seeing everyone next year in Waterloo. So thank you again.